Hey guys, this is Richard with the Gaming Gym. Today I'm going to be going over Lords of Waterdeep, the 2 to 5 player worker placement board game designed by Wizards of the Coast. Wizards of the Coast is the company behind some really large games such as Magic the Gathering, as well as Dungeons and Dragons. Specific to Dungeons and Dragons, Lords of Waterdeep takes place within one of the worlds that are very famous in Dungeons and Dragons. I am a old school veteran. I've played the tabletop game Dungeons & Dragons for, I'm dating myself a bit here, but I played the game for probably just a bit over 30 years. And I remember, I believe the world in which Waterdeep takes place is Forgotten Realms. I believe that was created sometime around the late 80s. I remember playing in the Forgotten Realms around early to mid 90s. And in the world of Forgotten Realms, one of the most famous, if not the most famous city, this legendary city, is known as the City of Waterdeep. And in the City of Waterdeep are sort of basically the ruling council, which is a bunch of members that wore these magical masks that allowed them to be hidden, and their identity was unknown to all the rest of the city folk. That theme does carry over. Now, it's a fantasy game. There's some theme to it in that you're trying to gather resources, which is gold and fighters and rogues and clerics. The board has that feel to it. You know, there's that parchment look to it, things like that. So it definitely does fit within theme. It doesn't look as though you're playing a game in a futuristic setting, yet you're talking about a world that's something in Dungeons & Dragons. However, to sort of bring out that theme even more, if you are familiar with the world of Forgotten Realms, and specifically Waterdeep, the theme really shines through. The quest cards and various cards that you'll play will reference specific locations within Waterdeep. It mentions specific people. The lords themselves have a real big gameplay effect, where, as I mentioned in Forgotten Realms, the lords are kind of behind the scenes. So what happens during setup is each player gets a lord card, and that lord kind of drives some of the direction that you're going to take with how you want to achieve the victory points, which is how you win in the game. And you look at that lord, and then you keep it hidden the remainder of the time, the remainder of the game. And you're allowed to look at it, of course, but the other players don't know who your lord is. And by playing sort of as this lord behind the scenes, you use various agents, which are actual components within the game, to go about throughout the city and gather up adventurers and resources, gold, and things like that, in order to move your agenda forward and follow through with your interests and complete the quests, which are going to give you points. So that tie-in to what literally occurred within the Forgotten Realms world and how the game tries to play that out really is pretty smooth. I think it flows very well. Again, maybe that's my opinion on it. Obviously, it's my opinion, but maybe it's my sort of plus side to it all because I'm familiar with Forgotten Realms. But it definitely is a theme that does shine through, especially if you know the world. And it's not uncommon to know the reference point of the City of Waterdeep and Forgotten Realms, because it is a hugely popular setting within a massively popular game, Dungeons & Dragons. And again, coming from the same company that currently has the rights to all of the Dungeons & Dragons stuff, and they're the ones that made the game, it ties in quite well. I'm going to go over a few sample turns and obviously the setup, show some of the components of just the base game, which is 2 to 5 players. There is an expansion called Scoundrels of Skullport, which can increase it to 6 players, and I have heard some very good things about it. I do have the expansion on iOS. I have played it on iPad, and it basically just gives you more goodness of whatever you would enjoy with this game. So that being said, let's get right into setup, and let's move forward with Lords of Waterdeep, the 2 to 5 player worker placement game by Wizards of the Coast. Okay, here we go with setup for Lords of Waterdeep. I'm just going to briefly go over all of the components, and then we'll go into the next step, which will be showing a couple of sample gameplay turns. So the first thing you're going to want to do is, obviously based on the number of players, have each player choose a color. So there are 5 colors in the game. You have, what I have here set up is a demo between the Knights of the Shield and the City Guard, which would be yellow and black. There are some additional, obviously. There's the Silver Stars, which is the blue player. The Harpers are green, and the Red Sashes red. Now, all of these groups, the Knights of the Shield, City Guard, Sashes, Harpers, and Silver Stars, they are factions and organizations of well-respected, well-known within the lore and the story and the world of Forgotten Realms. I remember reading a lot about the Harpers, but as far as how it applies to gameplay, all they represent is simply player colors. So here, as I said, I will be playing with the yellow player and the black, the Knights of the Shield and the City Guard. Once you take your player board, you're going to take all of the tokens and various components of the respective colors. So I have 4 agents, and in a 2-player game, you start the game with 4 agents. Your agents are your action tokens, basically, that you will set to various locations on the board using that worker placement mechanic. And in a game with fewer players, the minimum being 2 players, you're going to start the game with more agents, where in a 5-player game, I believe it's starting the game with only 2 agents per player. So you're going to take the appropriate number of agents as mentioned in the rulebook. You put them on your agent pool on your player board. In addition, each player is going to take an additional agent and put them down here in the agent pool at the bottom of the board. And what gameplay and what effect that has is at the start of the 5th round, and I will explain how this round track works. At the start of the 5th round, players will retrieve that additional agent and give them basically more options, and now you have an additional worker to work with. So that's just neat to help speed up the game as well. After putting your agents on your agent pool, and some of them, as you saw there, fly and move and jump, you also take the building control tokens of your appropriate color. Here I just have 3 here, but there's a larger stack, as you can see, by the black player. And what those apply to and what they're for is you have all of these buildings that will be set up on the board, and whenever a player purchases a building, you put them in one of these 10 building spaces. There's no significance to what side of the board they go on or what spot they're in, but you put a building down, and then you put your, if I was the black player and I bought that building, I would take my building control token and put it in the corner, and that just signifies that I'm the owner of that building. And what that does is buildings provide a variable and a lot of replayability in that you're usually not going to get through all of the buildings with any game, and it's shuffled. So they just provide additional spots, each with their own various rewards and benefits for moving to going to that location beyond what's just sort of the base places to go to on the board. So buildings provide additional places and options for players to go to. So that's all these tokens are for, is they're just to signify which colored player controls that. You also have these 100-point markers in each color. Here we have the yellow and the black. And what these are for is there's a scoring track along the edge of the board. At the end of the game, which is at the end of the 8th round, the player with the most points wins the game. And you gain points by fulfilling the agenda and the interests of your lord by completing quests, which I'll go over in a moment. So you keep your score, and if any player makes it all the way around the board once, which is 100 points, you just use these tokens to indicate that. So it's not 100% necessary. You're not going to typically forget whether you're at 11 points or 111, but it's just neat that they gave you these components so that you can just sort of, if the yellow player has already been around the board once and is at 11 points, I would just then take this 100-point component, little victory point token, and just put it somewhere on or near my board to indicate that I've already scored 100 points, which is common. It will come into play. Players will typically score, almost all players in every game I've played, and I've played the game probably a dozen times, have all scored over 100 points. So it's just neat to have those components there. You've also got some gold. Gold comes in 2 denomination types, basically. You've got the 1-point gold tokens, which are the squares, and then the crescent moon shape is 5-point gold tokens. So next, let's go on to the cards. There are 3 card types. The lords are shuffled, and then 1 is dealt to each player. You can return the remainder of these back to the box without revealing them. Obviously, each player is going to take a look at that lord, and like for example, this one here, that's a bad example, this one. Kelvin Arunson, who's probably one of the most famous lords from, if you know anything of Forgotten Realms. At the end of the game, you're going to score 4 bonus victory points for each Arcana and Warfare quest you complete. So this just sort of behind the scenes of what types of quests, what types of things is he trying to accomplish, because it's quests that provide you with the victory points, and that provides that bonus scoring mechanic, and it gives you some direction of where you want to go. The quests all have a type, so as he said here, you want to complete Arcana and Warfare to get bonus points. You can complete other quests that are not of Arcana or Warfare, but you're going to get bonus points by completing those specific 2. This is a Warfare quest. This is a Piety quest. This is a Skullduggery quest. So it's just interesting thematically as well, in that you have these quests that they're trying to complete. And the other aspect of that is in Arcana quests is going to involve and require some component or some piece of wizards. A Piety quest is going to require clerics. A Skullduggery quest is going to require rogues. So it's almost as though you're playing this Lord, Kelvin Arunson, and you're going to get bonus victory points for fulfilling Arcana and Warfare quests. And as I mentioned a little in the intro, the behind the scenes of him is he's trying to do what he can to acquire as many fighters and wizards as possible to fulfill his agenda, which is how it transfers into you scoring extra points and trying to win the game. So it's interesting, the way the lords play into it. And I mentioned in the intro, if you are familiar with Forgotten Realms, this guy has entire textbooks written about him. So, the people they're not just made up names. They do fit within the lore and the world of Forgotten Realms and Waterdeep specifically. So you'll be dealt out that Lord card. You keep it secret. You can look at it any time, but it's secret from the rest of the players. Each player is going to also get intrigue cards, 2 each. This is kind of your poker hand, and you keep these face down. They provide the bulk of the interaction with other players. They let you interact with other players in ways that allow you to do negative things, harmful things to them, or take resources from them, things like that. So you'll keep those. You start from a shuffle deck, obviously, and you put those there in the appropriate spot. Now you have the quests, which I've already talked about a little bit. Each player starts with 2 quests, and those are face up. And that shows other players basically an indication of what direction you're kind of going, what resources you're going to need to get. And you take 4 quests and you put them face up on the board. To start the game, you put the quest deck here. You have your scoring player markers in the appropriate colors, red or yellow and black. Logo over here. Hopefully you're a Steelers fan. They'll go here on 0. And as I mentioned, you'll move around the board as you score points accordingly. You have your adventurers, which I've alluded to a little bit when I talked about the quests. You've got rogues. I just put them in the neat little bins here. Just keep them off to the side of the board, and players will acquire them, and as you acquire them, you put them on your player board in your tavern, and you keep them there until you use them, basically, to complete quests. So you've got fighters, rogues, the white cubes are clerics, and the purple are the purple are wizards. So you just keep those off to the side of the board. That's the main resource you're going to be getting and acquiring in the game to help you complete your quests and fulfill basically the agenda of the lords. Other than that, the last bit is you're going to take this building stack and you reveal the top 3 buildings and you put them in their appropriate places. I then use these victory point tokens to signal the first round. There are 3 extra tokens here. These 2 are extra agents known as the ambassador and the lieutenant. They may not come into play during any of the games. It just depends on what buildings and what quests are drawn. But they just provide a benefit of giving the player that acquires them an extra agent, which is a huge benefit. So they're going to stay off to the side of the board. And then you have the start player marker. It mentions in the rulebook the player that most recently visited another city is the start player. So that player, let's say it's yellow, would get that start player marker. And then to signal the start of the game, you're going to take the first 3 victory point tokens here. And there's always 3 on each of the 8 round spots at the end of round 8. The player with the most points wins. I take 1 and I put them 1 each on the 3 buildings. So over the course of the game, any buildings that are not purchased are going to accumulate these victory point tokens. And all that means is that when you purchase that building, you immediately can return these back to the box and you gain an equal number of victory points as however many are on there. So it just provides some incentive, but it also is the round marker in that once the second round begins, I take these 3 and I move them on top as such. I take these 3 to signal the start of the third round and they go on top there. So it's just a neat little mechanic of how they keep track of the round markers. It goes on top of the buildings, which provides some extra incentive for purchasing those. Once we've started the first round, the player with the start player marker is going to take their first turn, and the game will begin then. I think that's about it. Oh, one last thing, the gold I already mentioned. The start player always starts with 4 gold, and then each player beyond, so the second player is going to get 1 additional gold, so 5 gold. The third player would get 6 gold. The fourth player would get 7 gold. So basically, it's just the players that are going to be last to act during the first round of the game are going to start the game with more gold. And that's just to kind of help compensate for the fact that they are going to not have first choice of what locations they want to go to. So this is basically what the board is going to start like. We would remove the 3 tokens to signal that round 1 has now begun. And the first player, indicated by this first player castle marker, Castle Waterdeep, is going to take their agent and put it somewhere on the board accordingly. Take the appropriate actions, which we will go over during a couple of sample gameplay turns. Okay, so here we go with the first round starting the game. Just doing a couple of sample turns showing you the way things will kind of work and the flow of the game once you actually start playing. So as was already shown during the setup, we're going to assume that the yellow player playing Knights of the Shield was the player that most recently visited another city. So they start with the first player marker. They will go first. As the first player, they begin the game with 4 gold. The second player, which is in our 2-player game here, the City Guard playing black, will start with 5 gold. Both players obviously begin at 0 points, victory points for now. And let's just take a look. So Knights of the Shield is playing as Larissa Neathel. And this is the only, I believe, the only lord in the game that has a little bit of a different bonus point condition. She gets 6 points for each building that you control at the end of the game. So obviously, you're going to want to build as many buildings as possible. The lord for the City Guard, and the black player would know this, the yellow player would not, and vice versa, is, as we went over, Kelvin Blackstaff Arunson. The black player is going to be going for Arcana and Warfare quests, and that's going to be the way that he's going to get some bonus points. The starting quest for the yellow player is Repel the Sea Wraiths and Eliminate a Vampire Coven, which is a Warfare and a Piety quest. Now, since the bonus points of the Lord is going to be based on building as many buildings as possible, what quests the Knights of the Shield, the yellow player, completes is not going to matter as much. So just whatever is going to be most efficient. So to start with, though, looking at Warfare and Piety, and if there was another player, obviously besides just myself, the City Guard, the black player, would be able to look and notice that the yellow player, Knights of the Shield, is trying to complete Warfare and a Piety quest. One of the two. I don't have to say which one I'm going for. But what that shows is that in order to complete this Warfare quest, I'm going to need 1 white cube, which is a cleric, 4 fighters, and 1 wizard. And to complete my Piety quest, I'm going to need 2 clerics, 2 fighters, and 1 rogue. So the common theme there is I need both clerics and fighters in order to complete either quest. That is going to, show itself a little bit, kind of tip my hat, so to speak, or open my hand when I start going towards those quests or towards those action spaces on the board. But it just gives also an idea for where the City Guard might be able to go to kind of interfere with my plans. So what I'm going to do, though, is this one here rewards me with 11, the one that only eliminate the Vampire Coven. rewards me with 11 victory points and 4 gold. This one gives me 15 victory points and 2 gold. And the Warfare, and the reason why I'm obsessing kind of over explaining where I want to go before actually taking my action is this is sort of the thought process you want to go and use to help make your turns as efficient as possible. Is this Warfare quest, which gives me 15 points and 2 gold versus 11 points and 4 gold. This Warfare quest requires 6 cubes. The Piety quest requires 5 cubes. However, of the 6 cubes, I need a wizard and a cleric, and those are harder to obtain. And you'll see that when I make a couple of spots. But just for moving forward, let's go ahead and pick this one. Let's say I'm going to go towards that quest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my first guy, and I think I'm going to go... I need both clerics and warriors for both quests. So I'm going to go to the plinth. And going to the plinth rewards me with a white cube, which is a cleric. My turn is done. The City Guard player goes. And for the City Guard, he wants to start working towards Arcana and Warfare. He already has a Warfare quest, so let's complete that. He needs 4 warriors and 1 cleric. The cleric spot's already taken up. There is no other spot right now on the board except if someone was to purchase and own this building here, that's going to give me clerics. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the Field of Triumph and get 2 warriors. Now the third agent, or I have 3 agents left, each player. I'm going to take my turn. I probably should have looked at my intrigue cards, but let's just keep it simple here. I have a mandatory quest. What that is that's basically a negative effect for my opponent. I can go to the Waterdeep Harbor, and by going there, I can play one of my intrigue cards. I would give that to my opponent, and mandatory quest means it's basically a quest that makes his turns really inefficient because he's not allowed to complete any other quest until he completes this quest. So that's a really good one. And then the other intrigue card that the yellow player has is I can remove any cube of any color from an opponent's tavern and put it in my own tavern. So I don't want to do that yet. I want to wait till he gets something like a cleric or a real valuable one for me. So I'm going to keep those cards aside for now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go get that wizard that I might need later on. So I'll go there, and I'll take the purple cube. This player is going to go. Let's see what kind of intrigue cards he has. He also has a mandatory quest, and he's able to take 2 wizards from the supply, but an opponent that I choose, which in this case is only going to be the yellow player, gets to take a wizard also. So what I'm going to do is, to show how that works, I will actually do that. So I'm going to take my agent, and I'm going to go to Waterdeep Harbor, and it allows me to play an intrigue card, which I will just play, and it just immediately goes to the discard pile. It allows me to take 2 wizards from the supply. They go in my tavern, and an opponent of my choice, in this case the yellow player, is going to take a wizard, and that's going to go in his tavern. And after placing any agent down, you're allowed to complete 1 quest if possible. I don't have any quests that I can complete right now because I don't have the appropriate... In order to complete this quest, I need 4 fighters and 1 cleric. I've only got 2 clerics, or 2 wizards and 2 fighters, so I'm not able to complete that quest yet. But I'll show the significance of that when we finish this one round, of where, besides playing the intrigue card, what else happens with that. The yellow player is going to... I think the yellow player is now going to go play that intrigue card that we talked about, where it allows me to remove one of any color. So I'll discard this, and I will take a purple and put it in mine. And even though I only need 1 purple to complete this quest, purples are hard to come by, so it's going to help me maybe in some later quests. And then the black player, there's a good-looking quest here. So I would like Arcana or Warfare quests. I like this one. It's a reward of 25 points. So what I'm going to do is, in either of these 2 spaces, I can go and get either 2 gold and a quest card, or a quest card and an intrigue card. If I go here, I wipe all these quests. They get discarded, and 4 new ones come out, and then I get to pick one. So I don't want to wipe those because I want this quest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here to the Cliff Watch Inn. Now this indicates that there's 3 spaces. That means 3 various agents can go there, whereas on this space, only once one person goes there, no one else can go there for the round. And then what will happen is when all the agents are gone and they've been put out to their various locations, Each player takes all their agents back, clears the board. It goes to round 2. The first player marker does not change. It stays with that player and play continues clockwise unless a player goes to Castle Waterdeep, which allows them to automatically gain control of the first player marker, which will therefore then allow them to become the first player on later rounds. And they also get to draw an intrigue card. So let's finish resolving this one. I'll take the quest, which is the one I wanted. There's no limit to how many quests I can have, and it immediately replaces a new quest, and I get an intrigue card. So I'll draw one, and this just goes to my hand, which I can play later. So we'll just speed this up. We'll go ahead and put the yellow player, and we'll say the yellow takes 4 gold from the supply for maybe some other effect later on. And let's just pretend I was able to complete a quest that required 2 wizards. That goes back to the supply, a cleric, and now that I got 4 gold, it required 6 gold. 3, 4, 5, 6. And let's pretend it was this card. So that's the quest I just completed. I get 15 points and 2 gold back. So I'd get the 2 gold. This completed quest as a regular just blank quest goes face down completed. That way I can refer to it at the end of the game if I happen to have a lord that gets bonus points for that. And then I would move the 15 points. So yellow would have went and is currently winning the game at 15 points. And that's how that would work. Some quests are called plot quests. And plot quests indicate that here's a regular quest with nothing on the bottom, and here's a plot quest that reads plot at the bottom. The way a plot quest works is instead of turning them face down, you put them on the side of your player board, and they stay face up because they give you an immediate reward most of the time, and there's always an ongoing reward that may trigger throughout the remainder of the game. So they're really good quests to complete because they can allow you to have constant benefits depending on what triggers them. So that was just an example of, even though it was the incorrect quest and it wasn't really the right resources, for demonstration purposes, I just wanted to show that's what it's like to complete a quest there. So let's pretend that we've moved here and we got 2 rogues. Now that's it. Both agents are gone. All the agent pools are gone. Now the players at Waterdeep Harbor, that's the only space, what happens is in order from 1, 2, and 3, and you can have the same player go there, you now redistribute any meeples or agents that are at Waterdeep Harbor. Everything else stays where it is. And to redistribute, you put it somewhere where there's available space. In this case, the only places are Castle Waterdeep and the Builder's Hall. So the black player, being the first player to play a intrigue card, is going to go ahead and you can't put it back at Waterdeep Harbor again. You cannot. So I will redeploy it or move it from Waterdeep Harbor and put it over here, which allows me to take one of the quests, and I get 2 gold. He's done, and now this player, yellow, gets to put it here, which would now let me maintain ownership of this. I didn't have to do it because there's no player to go after me. So since no one is able to take it from me, I would have kept it anyway. But I also get to draw an intrigue card. And then that would signal the second round, which would now remove these 3 tokens. 1, 2, 3. All players take all their pieces back. First player goes again. That's just a little bit of a sample, kind of the way it's played. I know I didn't purchase any buildings. Basically the way that would work is I would put a meeple there or an agent, and then I would pay gold equal to that cost. In this case, it's 8. I take these 2 pieces off because this is a building that lasted 2 rounds and was never purchased. I return these victory point tokens to the box. I would move 2 spaces. I'd put this building anywhere, as I indicated during setup. I'd put my ownership token here to show that I control that building. And I would pay 8 gold to the bank in order to purchase that. A new building replaces it, but you don't put victory tokens on it. That happens at the beginning of the next round. So you'll notice that since this building that was previously, this is a newer building that was flipped, it's only going to get 1 token, where these 2, which have been around for 2 rounds now, is going to get a 3rd victory point token and a little more incentive. But now yellow can take an action by moving to this location, getting that benefit, which is 2 rogues and a wizard. But because it's not his building, yellow gets that benefit, but as the owner, I get to choose either a rogue or a wizard, and I'll take a wizard. That's the benefit of owning a building. I could have also gone there and simply gotten the reward of the 2 rogues and the wizard, but as the owner, I don't get to trigger my own owner ability. So that's the way buildings work and ownership of those buildings. I showed you a little bit of how the buildings work in that they're always paid for with gold. And that should be hopefully a few sample turns there. And you continue on until the end of the 8th round. The player with the most points wins. That's it. Thanks for watching.